Hello everybody and welcome to Methods Week 3. This week we are going to start modeling with solids. Okay, so we're going to start in on solids, and the first thing we're going to do is set ourselves up with a nice clean area to work on, and then we're going to get into good modeling habits, and we're going to start by making a new layer called box. I'm going to take this layer and I'm going to rename it. And then I'm going to put myself on that layer. So everything I build to start with is going to be on this layer called box. Okay, so starting with solids, let's start with the solid tools and just see what we can build out of solids without actually having to draft anything. So if you go up to the very top, you have your solid tools option up here, and that brings up a whole set of buttons. You also have solids over here when you click on that. So let's start with the box. That's our most basic. If you click on that, left click, it's going to ask you a couple of things. It's going to say you can build it from a diagonal, a 3-point, or you can just do it from corners. Let's just zoom into the origin here. I'm going to turn on my grid snap, and I'm just going to stay on the grid and build a square. So I left click on the origin, left click at a point in space, and then left click will take me up into the Z axis, and I will have a box. And we looked at this in the very first class, and we looked at, there's the wireframe version, shaded version, the Arctic version. We're going to go back to shaded. So that's your most standard box that you can make. So let's look at how we would do that if we wanted to do it from measured dimensions. So let's take that box, and then I'm going to start here in the corner. And I actually, if I want to say I build my box 10 on one side, 20 on the other side, I actually want to go up here to the top where it says other corner of base or length, and I want to do 3-point. And that'll allow me to put in the length and the width of the base of the box. So let's put in, I said 10 over here. So I type in 10 and then I left click, and then I can type in 20. Hit enter or left click, and now I've got the box at the bottom. You can see I can actually flip it around until I actually left click to put it in place. So let's left click one more time to put it in place. And then we're going to go vertically, and let's say vertically we want to go 30. So we just type in 30 and hit enter. So same tool, if we know the measurements of the box that we want to create, we can put them in and build it that way, right? Those are the easiest ways to make a box using the box tool. Right? Let's look at the other tools that we have. We've got some basic shapes here. Let's just go down. We've got the sphere. So if I click the sphere here in the center, origin, let's just see what happens. Let's go out. Boop, I've got a square, or I've got a sphere. So the sphere, let's see what happens when we want to put in dimensions. So we'll take the sphere, hit the center there. And then it'll ask you here, you can enter the radius. So it's by default giving you a 12-inch radius. If I'd rather put in the diameter, maybe I know the diameter, put the diameter in. If I want to change that to say 36, and do that, it'll enter it for me. All right, so sphere, pretty easy. Know the center, know the shape. And then you get into ellipsoid, we'll skip that one. Cone, pyramid, let's pop over to cylinder, because we like to use cylinders because cylinders are also the same thing as a nice round column. So let's see what happens when we do the cylinder. Go to the origin, go out to the side, left click at a diameter, and then go into the Z axis and left click up here, and you've got a nice column. All right, so you just need to know the diameter and the height, or the radius. So let's try that again with some numbers. So if I click in that center point, here it has a diameter in. Say we want to do, say we know the radius is 6 inches. So we'll put in 6. And then say we want it to be a 12-foot column. So we could put in 12 feet. And then we have a nice 6-inch round by 12-foot column, right? There's some other shapes in here that are kind of fun, so you can play around with them. The torus or donut, where you give it an outside diameter and an inside diameter. It's kind of fun. Okay, so those are your main basic shapes. So let's look at what happens when we do some of these basic editing. So let's put the box back here. I'm just going to build any old box. So a box is made up of a series of surfaces. Right now that box is what's called a poly surface. If I click on the box with the cursor, it says one poly surface added to the selection. Whereas before we were using polylines, now we're using poly surfaces. Now if I click on that box and I hit the explode button over here, let's see what happens. If I hit escape, now that has actually turned my box into a series of surfaces. And I can start to take those surfaces away. I can also select all of those surfaces and turn it back into a solid. I think that'll work. Now that works only because all of those surfaces were closed. Okay? But it's important to remember that all your solids are just a series of surfaces. So if you explode them, become surfaces, I think. But then you cannot explode a surface beyond that. Okay? Okay, so those are the basic objects here. We'll get into these editing tools after we talk about a couple other ways to build solids. Okay, the next thing we are going to do is we're actually going to create our solids from lines. So let's go in here and I'm going to make a new layer and I'm going to call it lines. I'm going to select that as my current layer. And so going back to drawing lines, I'm going to switch back to the standard tools and I'm going to go back in here to the polyline. So let's make a polyline, and you made these. You guys are all very familiar with them because you just spent the last 2 weeks drawing two-dimensional patterns. So I'm just going to draw a box with those. So that's using a polyline to draw a box. I could also have gone in here to the rectangle tool, and I could have drawn a box like that. Okay. So once I have a box, I can click on that curve. And you can see here it says one curve added to the selection. And what I can do is I can go to my solid tools. And I like to either use solid up here. There's a bunch of commands. We're going to look at the extrude tools. Or you can use the solid buttons up here. And actually the extrude tools are here. So extrude. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do solid extrude planar curves. So you can see you can extrude curves or you can extrude surfaces. We're going to start with curves. So I'm just going to click on straight and I'm going to see what happens. So I click on that. I can pull that box upwards or down to create a box. I could put in a number. And when I hit enter, it'll make that box that size. Right, so that was just from extruding that curve. So let's look at the other things we can do when we extrude a curve. Click here, click the line, hit enter. And it's going to ask me a couple things. It's going to ask me the distance we put in, the direction. Your mouse can show what direction it's going. Both sides, this one's kind of nice. This is a toggle. So if I click both sides, oops, it'll pull that extrusion from both directions. So it'll pull an equal amount in both directions. So if I do 12 again, it'll actually pull a box 12 up and 12 down, right? So that can be useful depending on what you're drawing. You can also do most of these, you can also make it not a solid, in which case it'll actually make it a shell without a top and a bottom. So it's really like extruding a series of surfaces from lines. The other thing you can do is if you go to the solid command, you can also extrude things. Let's just jump to tapered. Instead of it extruding straight, it can actually extrude at an angle. So in this case, that angle's at 45, but let's just do something a little more subtle. It's at 5, so you can see it's tapering it up, or in this case, it's tapering it down. We can also make that angle a negative number. So if I do -5, and extrude up or down a -5. Right, so then I have a tapered shape. And that's a whole solid, and then same rules apply. I could explode it. Now it's a series of surfaces. And in the end, it all came from this curve. Okay? So that is solid from a curve. Okay, now that we've taken our solid from a curve, let's look at what else we can do. So I'm actually going to take this curve. I'm going to make a solid the way we just did. And do just one side. And then what I'm going to do is pop this onto the whole screen. I'm actually going to look at what I can do with a solid that actually exists. So here I'm going to switch over to a new layer. I'm going to call it New Solids. I pick a color that I can see. Let's do cyan. And now let's see if we want to do a solid from a surface. Let's try what happens when we click this surface. So we haven't split this box into surfaces, but this box is perceived by Rhino to be a series of surfaces. So we could do that again. We could take a surface and extrude it. We could also take the surface we already have and extrude it again. So see what's happening here though is if I click on these are each different boxes. They're all independent objects. They're also all movable with the gumball, just the same way the lines were. They're also scalable with the gumball. They're rotatable with the gumball. Right? All the things that we were doing with the lines we can do in 3 different directions now. Right? It's probably, the gumball is even more useful in 3D. So let's look at what else we can do. So we could extrude a surface to be also tapered. So same idea, let's make that bigger so you can see what's going on. Okay. We can also, if you wanted to, we could draw a surface. So we can use the surface tool here. We could draw a surface and then we could extrude it. Extrude surface. Right. Same thing goes with the polyline. I've been drawing boxes, but we can make any shape as long as the curve is closed. This is the important step. So I'm going to turn my ortho off, but you see I'm drawing in 3D space and it'll draw on that plane. But when I get to the end here, I want to make sure to close the curve. And once it's closed, then I can extrude it into a solid. Watch what happens if I explode it and I try to just select these and extrude them. That'll work. But watch if I take this line away and I try to extrude it, it's no longer a solid, it's a series of planes because it is not closed. What we can do is if we have curves that we want to connect, we can type the command close curve, and it won't close it. If we want to close a group of curves, we actually have to use the command join. So I could click here, select all these curves, and I either type join, and it makes an open curve, but it turns a series of independent lines into a polyline. And then if I want to close it, I can type close curve. That curve closes. Then I can extrude that as a whole solid. So if you wanted to, you could do something like, put my ortho back on. You can use a couple of the tools we used last class. Watch if I draw. I've got a line here. Maybe I want to array that linearly. Maybe I want 10 of them. From here to here. Then I can take those. I can extrude these curves straight. And then I can take all those surfaces and extrude those surfaces straight. And now I have a whole array of solids. I could also then take these solids, speaking of arrays, I could make a polar array. Right? All of those commands that we did last week, you can do all of them with all of these 3D tools. Okay? So that is solids from surfaces and curves. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to look at editing solids, because just because we built a solid doesn't mean we want it to stay that way. Okay, so I'm going to start by building a couple of solids. I'm going to make a box. And then I'm going to make under new, let's put that under box. Under new solids, I'm going to make a column. It's a little bit bigger. And then let's make a sphere over here. Okay, so these are what's called the Boolean commands. So you can use the solid tools here, and there's a bunch of options here: the Boolean union, Boolean difference, Boolean intersection, and Boolean split. You can also find them up here, the objects. So let's just go through each of these and see what happens. So Boolean union. So I'm going to click on that, and these are important to read the command line. So here, select surfaces, poly surfaces to union. These are all poly surfaces. I'm just going to select all of them with my left to right click. Hit enter when done, right click or hit enter. And now you can see what's happened is they've gone from being 3 separate entities to being one combined object, right? And you can see, if you look at the wireframe, that that object is actually, they're intersecting with each other. So if I hit explode, that object has been turned into, taking the sphere away, you can see now it's just a series of surfaces that wrap that shell, right? So that's union. So there's a difference then between, I'm just going to go backwards, the idea of grouping. So if I wanted to keep these items together, but I wanted them to retain their individual qualities, I could just group them like we did last week. But then if I wanted to separate them out and ungroup them, and I wanted to move the sphere away, that rectangle still exists underneath. Okay? So that's union. So you merge them into one big shell. The other one, next one, is difference. I use this all the time. This is one of my favorite tools. So difference. So let's see what happens. What surfaces are you going to subtract from? Let's subtract from the box. Hit enter to continue, enter or right click. And what surfaces are you going to subtract with? And see right here it says delete input no. I'm just going to change that, toggle it to yes so we can see what happens. So let's difference out both the cylinder and the sphere. So that's what we're subtracting with. Hit enter when done. And now we're left with a shape with a cylinder removed and a sphere removed, and the cylinder and the sphere disappeared. Okay? Let's do that again, but let's not delete the input. So if I undo it, we still have, if we ungroup, we still have 3 separate objects. So let's do that difference again. We'll subtract from the box, hit enter, and we're going to subtract with the sphere and the cylinder. We're going to change that delete input to no. And then you can see, if I move that away, the cylinder is still there, but the box has been cut away. Same with the sphere. Okay. Let's do one more thing with that. Let's do the opposite of what we've been doing. Let's do the difference, but let's take the box out of the sphere and the cylinder. So in this case, we're going to subtract from the sphere and the cylinder. Hold down shift so you can pick 2 things. Hit enter, and then subtract out the box. And here I'm going to do delete input yes. So let's make the box go away and see what happens. Box goes away. Now there's a hole where the box was and a hole where the box was. All right? So that's different. Okay? Let's go through the next one. So the next one is intersection. So let's see what happens here. First set of surfaces and poly surfaces. I'm going to start with the box. Second set, I'm going to hit the sphere. And then here, they just give me what's left in that area. So you're familiar with the idea of the Venn diagram and what overlaps. This is the overlap between the 2 of them. Okay, let's try that again with the cylinder. It's the first set, the box is the second set, and what's left is just that little bit. Okay, and then the last one here is Boolean split. So same thing, surfaces to split, enter, cutting surface here. Let's delete input yes. Now you can see the object, let's just move this out of the way. It actually split the object into 2 pieces. So instead of removing it, it split it, it sliced it. It took like an ice cream scoop out of it, right? But it kept the 2 parts, right? Let's try that again with this cylinder here. So it's a difference. We're going to split, hit enter, split, hit enter. We can move that out of the way. Same thing. We've got a little piece of cylinder and the little corner taken out. Okay. So I think as you go along and you start modeling, you'll see how you start to use all of these things. One of the ways I use difference and split a lot is if I'm making, like, for example, say I want to make a window. I'll show you how I do that. I would start with the size of my window here. And then I have a window frame. So I'm going to say my offset is 2, and that's how big my window frame is. And then I could take those 2 lines together and I can do solid, extrude, curve, and say my frame is 4. So you can do curves to create an open zone. Then what I can do, let's switch to a different layer so you can see what we're doing. I could take that curve again, and I could do extrude straight 1. And then I could move using the move tool, just like we did with the lines. I could move that little window pane. So see, now I have a piece of glass in a window. And if I want it upright in a wall, I could use the gumball and rotate it 90 degrees. And I have a window, right? So that's one way to make a window. Maybe I want to start with, let's try to put this window in a wall. That's actually the best way to look at it. So we'll make a new layer here and we'll call it wall. And let's make a wall that is, we'll make the wall over here. Make a big fat wall. Okay, so say I want to take this window and put it inside this wall. So a couple favorite commands I'm going to use. First thing I'm going to do is, let's say we want to center it in the wall. So first I'm going to group this so my window and my frame stay together. And then I'm going to try to move this so that midpoint of the window, first vertically, I'll just put it on the vertical part of the wall. So now I know that's set up here. And now say I want to get the midpoint of the window to match the midpoint of that wall. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make an object to tell me how far to move. Instead of having to measure, I'm going to make an object that tells me how far I need to move it. So I'm just going to make a box. I'm going to click on the midpoint of the wall to the midpoint of the window and click twice here. And that'll make me a box that spans that distance. Now I know to get the midpoint of the window to match the midpoint of the wall, I need to move the window from this point over to that point. So I'm going to click on my window. I'm going to click on the move command. And I'm going to say move from this corner to that corner. And then I can delete this. And now say I want to move that window back into the middle of the wall. So I can find the middle of that wall and the middle of the window and do the exact same thing. The middle of the wall to the middle of the window, click here twice. Click. Because it'll make you a rectangle. And then I can move that back into space. And now, here's the tricky part. Now, my window's inside my wall, but I can't see it. So here's where I can use my view commands. Ghosted is a nice one. So I can see my window's in there, I just can't see it. So I'll show you my two favorite difference tricks. So first what I would do is I would come in here and I would left to right click so I could select the window but not the wall. And then I'm going to use a command called bounding box. And what bounding box does is it makes a rectangle around all of the extremes of the object that you have selected. Okay? So here, let's hide this wall. So I'm going to click on the wall, I'm going to hide it, and then I'm going to zoom into my window, and now I have a box that's bigger than my window. So watch what happens if I stretch the gumball, and then I show what I just hid. Now I have this box that is basically the exact same size as the window, but super thick. Now can you see where I'd want to use difference? So if I go back to shaded, I still can't see that wall, but if I use the difference command, difference, or going back to the solid tools, difference, take the surfaces to subtract from, here's the wall, I would subtract from that, hit enter, and then I would want to subtract this box that I made, enter, and now I've punched a hole in the wall that my window fits perfectly into, And if I rotate around, it's there too. Okay. So that's just one way that you would use difference. And I think as you get into your next assignment, you'll see that you're going to be putting windows and walls, and that tool is going to be very useful to you. So see all the tools I used there. I used hide and show, difference, bounding box, grouping. All of these things all work together to help you figure out how to make some of these different elements. Okay, so now we're going to go through the steps to get you started on the next assignment. So the first thing that you're going to have to do is go into the modules for methods and download the files associated with your project. So if you go under week 3, you're going to have each project has a series of files. So there's one linked website and then a few images to support. Now you can go and you can find any other images that help you build this project on the internet or in books if you want to use books. That would be great too. We're going to start. I'm going to download this Gwathmey plan and it's a JPEG. So I'm just going to click here and I'm going to download it for myself. So you can see here it's a series of images of floor plans. And it comes in a JPEG form, okay? So I've got that. Now, the important thing to understand about Rhino is Rhino can import some images, but it prefers to import PDFs. And if you go here to import, we haven't done this yet, but import button is right here, and you can see all the types of files that it will import. And you can see here that it does not like JPEGs, but it does like PDFs, okay? So what we need to do then is we need to take any JPEGs we have, or this works with PNGs, we want to turn them into a PDF. So we want to open Acrobat. And in Acrobat, we can just go to File, Create, and we can create a PDF from lots of different types of files. So I'm just going to click on PDF from File. I'm going to find that image where I downloaded it, Gwathmey Plans 2, and hit OK, and it just makes it into a PDF exactly as it was. So you can always do this with any kind of JPEG or image. You can just turn them into a PDF. Okay, so we just save that, and then wherever you save it, I'm just going to save it to my week 3 folder. Oop, it's already there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put that into Rhino. So I'm going to close that. And now we are in Rhino. I'm just going to go to the 4 views. And I'm going to go to Import. And I'm going to import that PDF. I'm going to hit Open. And then in these settings, don't really worry about it because I'm going to show you how to scale it so that it makes sense. Okay, so just hit OK, and you'll see that it brings it in. So in the 3D view, you can see it by default is going to put it on that origin control plane. So we can go over here, we can move to top view. And now you can see you've got your drawing. So let's do, first thing we want to do is let's put it on its own layer. So let's do original drawing. And then here, I'm just going to do change object layer. So now I can, if I'm on another drawing, I can turn that on and off, but I know it's always there. Okay, so now I have my drawing, I have it on its own layer. Now the very first thing that we need to do is we need to scale our drawing to match this. So in this case, I'll show you a couple different ways we can measure things, but in this case we have measurements on this drawing. Although if I look at them, 7.85, 9.1, these dimensions are definitely in meters. Right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert these from meters to inches. So the easiest way to do that is to use the internet. So I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to type meters 2 inches. And I'm just going to look at a nice big easy number I have here. There's 7.85. So let's see what 7.85 meters is 309 inches. Okay, which means I need to set this up so this actually measures 309 inches in my drawing. Okay, so move that to the side. So the easiest way to do that is to use the scale command. So first you do want to make sure that you're in the right units. So just like we did on the very first day, let's go to our units, make sure we're in inches, make sure we're in feet and inches. You can change our precision down to 1/128. Hit OK. So we have our units set up. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a line. I'm actually going to go onto the lines layer, and I'm going to change my line layer to red so it's easy to see. I'm going to take a line, and I am going to best approximate that point, and then I'm going to drag it up, and instead of dragging it to the end of this line, I'm just going to type 309 for inches. Okay, and then I'm going to left click and then right click. So now I've got a line that's 309 inches. And now all I need to do is select the drawing and scale the drawing up so that this line measures out to be 309 inches. So if I click my drawing, I can type scale, and then I click at my base point here. And then first I need a reference point. So my reference point is the end of this dimension line that says it's 7.85. So I click there. And then my drawing will get bigger, and I'll just keep making it bigger until it lines up with the first line that I drew. And then I can check this by typing the word distance. And I can go from here to here. And it's 25 foot 9 inches, which if I do that math, I put in 309 inches, divide by 25, or divide by 12, 25. Okay, so that's correct. So now all of these drawings are to scale, which means I can start using all of them to draft all of my different floors. Right, so our goal is to get the massing done on this project. So when I say massing, I'm thinking this major box here, this major cylinder, just without all the window openings, just the overall shape is what you're aiming to have for next week. And then we'll go in and we'll start putting some openings into it. Okay? So if I didn't have a dimension on my drawing, how would I do this? So let's look at another drawing. Okay, let's see what other drawings we have. Okay, so let's see what we would do if we didn't have dimensions. So let's try to import a different file. So I'm going to import this Villas-Savoie plan. I'm going to import the first floor plan, which I've already made into a PDF. And that comes in super small. Okay. So here, I do not have any dimensions on it. So what I want to do is I want to pick something. I can do a little research and see if I can find dimensions on things. For example, you might be able to find, with a little bit of Googling, the dimensions between the columns. Or sometimes I just use my default number, which is 3 feet. So oftentimes doorways or hallways are 3 feet. So that's a door here, that's a hallway. So what I can do is I can go back to my lines. I can draw a line from here this way and type 3 feet. And then click, left click, right click. So here's my line. So in this case, I want to scale it so that this hallway ends up 3 feet wide. So I'm going to click on my drawing. And I'm going to scale. I'm going to click my base point. And then it's going to ask me for my reference point, which is the other side of the hallway. And then I'm going to go all the way to the end of that line. Okay? And then if I want to check to see if I did it right, I click type distance. I measure from one side of the hallway to the other. And I've got 3 feet wide. Okay? Once you have one drawing, you can start to scale all of your other drawings that same way. So let's look at what we've got for Villa Savoie. Here we have, let's see what other drawings we have on this one. We also have an elevation. So we could go through those steps again. Let's convert that to a PDF. Sometimes if you right click, you can click the Convert to PDF button. We'll do a Save As into that same place. And then let's import that elevation. Import the elevation. And it puts it over here. Now the question is, where is this elevation on my drawing? So I can see I've got a base structure here, and you can see in plan I have this base structure here. So I can tell that I'm either looking at this wall or I'm looking at this wall. And here I see that I've got these doors in the center, and then you can also see as you go around how these lines start to get closer together, and that is a drafting convention that we use to make it look like walls are more curved, which means that we're here looking at this curved end. So we're seeing that curved wall in elevation. So I can take this drawing and I can move it to line it up with the columns. I can turn my ortho off. Here. And then I know we move it up so they're not overlapping. I can draw some lines to line these drawings up. So if I turn my ortho back on, and sometimes these older drawings are not perfectly lined up, and that's okay. We're just trying to get the overall as close as we can. So I've got 2 lines here, and those kind of hit the sides of those 2 columns. So here's a column and there's a column. So here we can move this drawing so that this column lines up with the edge of that line, and then watch how we can scale this one. So we type scale. This is our base point. Click here. This column over here is our reference point, and then we want to go all the way over to this line, and they'll stretch it so that they line up. And then really the way that this elevation aligns with our drawing is actually upside down, because this side is that side and this side is that side. What we really could do also is we could look at this 3-dimensionally. So right now this is all 2-dimensional, but we can actually take this and look at it 3-dimensionally. So if I go over here, I've got my plan, I've got my elevation. So now I could click on my elevation and I could rotate it 90 degrees so that it is facing up, right? Then I could even move this point, right? Probably draw a line. Probably should have done this. Let's draw a line. Let's draw 2 lines on our drawing that we can rotate with the drawing. So I'm going to draw a line that runs across here that matches this ground plane line. And then I'm going to actually take all of these and then rotate them 90 degrees so that the plan is facing upright. And then I can move these. Now I have a point to click on in space. And now I can move these until they actually line right up three-dimensionally. So now I have my floor plan here and my elevation here. And so with that, now this is where the magic starts to happen. So if I zoom in here, one thing I can do is let's check my layers. I've got my drawing and my drawing. Let's put those on the drawing layer. And maybe let's go in and lock that layer so that we don't move them around and mess up the scale. And then let's start drawing parts of our building. So I'm going to start with these columns. Draw a column. I'm going to make it orange. Double click that layer so I'm on it, and then I can go here to my solids. And remember, we'll be drawing on the ground plane. So I can actually find the center of that column and give my best estimate for how big it is. And then extend it, at least to start with, up to where it's showing it to me in the elevation. Right? Once I do that one, I can take it, and we're going to assume all the columns are the same size. And I think we can also assume that this building is symmetrical across the center. So we could do a couple of different things. We could copy this, use the copy command, click here, click at the next column, click at that center column. Then we could use the mirror command to do this. Mirror. Run those columns to the other side. They're not perfect, but we know that they're working this way. We could also take then all three or all five of these columns. If we hold Shift down, we can copy them all across. We can do columns, column, now not all of these are actually hitting where columns are, so I can delete some of them, or I can move some of them. I can make more of them. Right? I can start putting columns wherever I see them in the plan. I can also start to do the same thing with walls. So I could draw some of these walls. I can start to draw them up. Right? And I could even come over here and I could start to draw. Let's not worry about the elevation right now. Just look at all of these elements. So I can do this with each of the plans, stack them up, start to draw the shape. If I wanted to draw this floor plan, if I just wanted to draw the mass, what I would do is come back into top view. I would start to draw, to trace the lines that I see in here. So I've got a straight line here, straight line here, straight line here. And then it looks like I have a circle that runs here, so let's do this. Circle runs there. I'm going to trim that line. Use these as cutting objects. Right click, trim these two. And then I'm going to try to draw a circle. So if I draw a circle, I pick the center of that line, then I click to the outer part of that line. Then I have a circle that pretty much matches with that. Then I'm going to click the end of this line as a trimming piece. Got half a circle here, trim here. Then what I can do is I've got these two overlapping. I can trim them. Then watch, if I select all of these lines, I can join them. I can offset them. Say we offset them at 12 inches. And then look what we can do if we go back to perspective, the solid, and extrude them straight. Right? We start to get our building. Okay? So you're just going to keep working through that and working through the different, uploading the plans, setting them to scale, and stacking them. Okay? And that should get you started on massing for your first assignment, or your second assignment, first part.